Maya Brooks gripped the steering wheel a little tighter as the highway stretched into a ribbon of nothing but sky, dust, and fields. The city skyline was long gone, swallowed by endless acres of pasture and fence lines that cut across the horizon like scars. She flicked the radio off. Country music wasn't her thing, and the static between stations grated on her nerves. Silence was better, or at least it gave her the illusion of control. She was here on business, nothing more. A 2-day inspection and she'd be back at her desk in Houston, back in her sleek office where everything smelled like ink and ambition. Her boss's words still echoed in her head. "This is a big opportunity, Maya. Nail this report and we'll talk about that promotion." A promotion. Finally, after years of 12-hour days, skipped vacations, and climbing the ladder rung by rung, she was so close she could taste it. The GPS crackled before going dead. Maya frowned, glancing at the faded road sign she'd just passed. Delgado Ranch, 2 miles. She sighed. At least she was close. Pulling off onto the dirt road, her shiny black sedan bucked over ruts and rocks clearly meant for pickup trucks, not low-city cars. Dust billowed around her, coating her windshield, and she cursed under her breath. When the ranch finally came into view, it looked like something out of another century. A sprawling homestead framed by weathered barns, cattle grazing in the distance, and a massive oak tree that looked like it had seen generations come and go. It was beautiful. She hated that she noticed. The second her tires crunched to a stop in the gravel drive, a man stepped out from the barn, wiping his hands on a rag. He was tall, broad-shouldered, his skin bronzed by the sun, with dark hair that curled just under his hat. His shirt clung to him in all the ways that showed he worked the land, not a treadmill. He didn't smile. "You lost?" he called, his voice carrying easily across the distance. Maya straightened her blazer, grabbed her clipboard, and slid out of the car. Dust immediately clung to her heels, making her regret her choice of shoes. "I'm not lost," she said crisply, walking toward him. "Maya Brooks, inspector for the Harrison Development Group. I'm here to assess the property." The man's expression hardened. "Assess?" He tossed the rag onto a railing. "Lady, this land doesn't need assessing. It's been in my family for 5 generations. Maya forced a polite smile. She'd dealt with hostile property owners before. They usually cracked once they saw the numbers. "I understand this is personal to you. My role is just to evaluate the land's condition and potential. It's nothing against your family." His eyes narrowed, sharp as a blade. "You work for the people trying to buy us out. That makes it against my family." The silence between them stretched, weighted with more than just words. Somewhere in the distance, a cow lowed, breaking the tension for only a heartbeat. Maya adjusted her clipboard against her chest. "I don't want to argue with you, Mr. Delgado, Rafael Delgado, but most folks call me Rafe." He stepped closer, boots crunching in the gravel. "And arguing's not what I'm after. I just want you to understand, whatever your bosses are paying you to write up, this ranch isn't for sale." Their eyes locked. Maya felt the heat of the sun and the weight of his stare pressing down on her at once. For the first time in years, her usual armor, pressed blazer, professional detachment, practiced calm, felt thin. But she wasn't about to let him see it. "Well," she said, tilting her chin higher, "I suppose we'll just see what the report says, won't we?" Rafe gave a humorless laugh, low and rough. "Guess we will." Neither of them moved. The standoff was clear. And though Maya told herself this was just another assignment, deep down, something about the man, the land, and the way the air felt heavier here whispered that nothing about this job would be simple. The morning sun had already risen high, beating down on the ranch with a steady warmth that made Maya regret her long-sleeved blouse. She had dressed for an office, not for wide-open fields and barns that smelled faintly of hay, leather, and dust. Clipboard in hand, she walked toward the nearest fence line, making notes about soil composition, grazing patterns, and potential drainage issues. It was clinical, professional, numbers and conditions, not feelings. But Rafael Delgado seemed determined to drag feelings into it. He leaned against a post not far away, arms crossed over his chest, hat pulled low to shade his eyes. He didn't say a word, just watched her like a hawk circling its prey. Every time she shifted her weight or crouched to jot something down, she could feel his gaze. "You planning to hover all day?" she finally asked, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Planning to make sure you don't write lies about this land," he shot back. She exhaled sharply through her nose, biting back irritation. "I don't write lies, Mr. Delgado. I write reports that'll be used to strip my family of what's theirs." She straightened, facing him fully now. "Look, I don't make the offers. I just evaluate the property. Whether your family sells or not isn't up to me." He pushed off the post and closed the space between them, his boots crunching against dry earth. "That's where you're wrong. What you write decides whether those men in suits push harder, and trust me, they will. They smell blood the second they think someone's weak enough to sell." Maya held his stare, her pulse quickening. His nearness was distracting, though she hated herself for noticing. He smelled of sun, sweat, and the faint spice of leather. It was raw, masculine, and entirely unlike the sterile world she came from. "I'm not here to undermine your family," she said evenly, "but I have a job to do, so unless you're going to help, I suggest you step aside." For a long moment, Rafe didn't move. Then, slowly, a smirk tugged at the corner of his mouth. "City girl thinks she can boss me around." Maya bristled. City girl knows she doesn't have time for games. The smirk widened into something sharper, almost a challenge. "Then you'd better get used to me being underfoot, because I'm not letting you wander this ranch without me." She blinked, caught off guard. "Excuse me?" "Safety," he said simply, though his tone carried more weight than the word should. "This land isn't a downtown sidewalk. You don't know the terrain, don't know the animals, don't know the people. You'll stick with me." Her instinct was to refuse, to tell him she didn't need a babysitter. But as she glanced across the sprawling fields, the barbed wire fences, and the long stretches of sun-baked earth, a flicker of unease prickled through her. He wasn't wrong. Still, she lifted her chin. "Fine, but if you're going to shadow me, try not to breathe down my neck while I'm working." Rafe tipped his hat, eyes glinting with something between amusement and defiance. "No promises." And with that, he fell into step beside her as she continued down the fence line. Every note she scribbled, every detail she recorded, his presence loomed, steady, immovable, rooted, just like the land he was so desperate to protect. And though Maya told herself she could ignore him, part of her wondered if she'd underestimated what she'd stepped into. By late afternoon, Maya's car was gasping like an old man climbing stairs. She winced as the engine sputtered, the dashboard lights flickering like a bad omen. One final cough, and the sedan rolled to a reluctant stop halfway down the long gravel drive. "Unbelievable," she muttered, thumping the steering wheel. She popped the hood and stepped out, heat pressing down on her shoulders. Dust clung to her blouse and heels, and she knew she looked wildly out of place bending over the smoking mess of machinery. After a few seconds of staring blankly at the engine, she sighed. Cars weren't her strong suit. Reports, contracts, deadlines, those she could master. But under the hood of a car, she was lost. "Need a hand?" The voice came from behind her, deep, steady, threaded with something that sounded far too close to amusement. Maya turned to see Rafe leaning against the fence a few yards away, arms folded. "I'm fine," she said quickly, though she wasn't. He pushed off the fence and strolled closer, boots crunching in the gravel. "That car doesn't sound fine. I'll call a tow," she insisted, pulling out her phone. "No signal, of course." Rafe's brow arched as he glanced at the dead screen. "Looks like you're out of luck. Closest mechanic is in town, and that's 15 miles away. You're not walking in those shoes." Maya bristled. "I'll figure it out." "Or," Rafe said, his tone maddeningly calm, "you can come inside, have some supper, and wait for me to take a look at it later." She hesitated. Dinner with the man who'd spent the morning shadowing her every move? Not exactly appealing, but the thought of sitting in her car, baking in the Texas heat with no reception, was worse. "Fine," she said, more clipped than she intended. Rafe didn't gloat, just gave a small nod and motioned toward the house. The Delgado homestead was bigger up close, a sprawling farmhouse with wide porches and a roof that had seen decades of weather. The smell of something savory drifted through the open windows, spices, slow-cooked meat, the warmth of a real kitchen. Inside, the house was alive. Voices overlapped, laughter carried from the dining room, and children darted between legs with the kind of freedom Maya had never known. Rafe's father, Miguel, was at the head of the table when they entered, a tall man with weathered hands and eyes that crinkled kindly even as they studied her curiously. Beside him sat his wife, Esperanza, her smile wide and welcoming. Aunts, uncles, cousins. It felt like half the county was gathered around the long table. "Mama," Rafe said, pulling out a chair, "this is Maya. She's working out here for a couple days." Maya opened her mouth to explain further, but Esperanza was already ushering her toward the seat with a warm hand on her arm. Sit. You're too thin. You need a plate." Before she could protest, a dish was set before her, piled high with rice, beans, roasted vegetables, and what smelled like the most tender beef she'd ever encountered. Maya hesitated only a second before taking a bite. The flavor hit her all at once, smoky, rich, layered with spices. Her eyes widened. A ripple of laughter moved around the table at her expression. "Careful," one of Rafe's cousins teased. "You'll get used to it and never leave." Heat crept into her cheeks. She ducked her head and focused on her food, but as the meal went on, something inside her loosened. The Delgado family laughed freely, teased one another, passed plates without being asked. The air was thick with warmth and familiarity. It was noisy, chaotic, alive. Maya realized she couldn't remember the last time she'd sat down to a meal that wasn't eaten alone at her desk or in front of her laptop. Across the table, Rafe watched her quietly, his usual hard edges softened just slightly in the glow of family. And for the first time since she'd arrived, Maya wondered if she wasn't just here to write a report. Maya woke to the faint crow of a rooster and the smell of fresh coffee drifting up the hallway. She blinked at the ceiling for a moment, disoriented. The guest room she'd been given was simple but welcoming, hand-stitched quilt, lace curtains swaying with the morning breeze, a wooden dresser polished smooth from years of use. It was nothing like her sleek apartment in the city, where everything matched but nothing held meaning. She stretched and swung her feet to the floor, her heels from yesterday sitting awkwardly by the bed. They looked ridiculous here, like artifacts from a different life. She slipped them on anyway, armor for the day, and followed the murmur of voices downstairs. In the kitchen, the Delgado family was already alive with motion. Esperanza was flipping tortillas on the stove, while two of the cousins argued over who made the better salsa. Children giggled at the table, eating sweet bread and leaving sticky fingerprints behind. And in the middle of it all stood Rafe, pouring coffee for his father, his presence steady as a tree in the storm. Maya hesitated in the doorway, suddenly aware of how out of place she must look in her fitted blazer and pencil skirt. But Esperanza spotted her immediately and waved her over. "Buenos dias, Mia. Come eat. You'll need strength if you're going out with Rafe today." "With Rafe?" Maya echoed, sliding into a chair despite herself. Rafe set a steaming mug in front of her, his mouth tugging in the faintest smirk. "You can't assess this land from a car window. I'll show you the property myself." Maya bristled. "I don't need a tour. I know what the investors want." "And what do you want?" Rafe asked, his dark eyes steady on hers. The question startled her. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. She'd never been asked that in a business meeting, never been asked that at all, really. Before she could scramble for an answer, Esperanza set a plate of eggs, beans, and tortillas in front of her, and conversation around the table shifted back to laughter and chatter. Maya took a bite, and the flavors filled her in a way her usual protein bar never had. She tried to push it down, but something twisted in her chest as she watched the easy banter around her. This wasn't just a family. It was a living, breathing net that caught everyone who fell into it. By the time Rafe motioned for her to follow him outside, she felt oddly heavy, not from the food, but from the strange tug of longing she couldn't shake. The morning sun bathed the ranch in gold, lighting the fields where cattle grazed and horses kicked up dust. Maya pulled her blazer tighter, though the heat was rising fast. "Keep up, city girl," Rafe teased, already a few steps ahead. She rolled her eyes, but there was no real heat behind it. She fell into step beside him, her heels clicking against the packed dirt until they sank awkwardly into the ground. He glanced at them, shaking his head with a low chuckle. "What?" she snapped. "Nothing," he said, though amusement lingered in his voice. "Just seems to me you came dressed for a boardroom, not a pasture. I didn't exactly plan to break down in the middle of nowhere," she shot back. Rafe's grin widened, but he didn't argue. Instead, he gestured out at the land stretching beyond them. "This isn't just dirt and grass," he said. "Every fence post, every tree line, it's part of our story. My father taught me where the rivers shift after the rain, which hills catch fireflies first in summer. My abuela used to walk these trails singing old songs from Mexico. This land isn't just ours, we belong to it." Maya followed his gaze, and for the first time she really looked. The rolling fields weren't just empty space, they pulsed with life, layered with history she hadn't considered. She swallowed, unsettled. In the city, land was numbers on a spreadsheet. Here it was memory, blood, legacy. And as Rafe looked at her, something flickered between them, a quiet challenge, a dare to feel instead of calculate. For the first time in years, Maya wondered if her carefully built world of contracts and deadlines was missing something vital. The afternoon stretched hot and still, cicadas buzzing in the trees as Maya and Rafe walked the length of the northern pasture. Dust clung to her skirt, and sweat dampened her collar. Every so often, she caught Rafe sneaking glances, his expression hovering somewhere between amusement and pity. "You look like you're about to collapse," he drawled. "I'm fine," Maya insisted, though her calves burned and her heels had officially become weapons against herself. She had tried to keep her professional poise, but each step sank her further into discomfort. Finally, Rafe stopped. With a shake of his head, he crouched down in front of her. "What are you doing?" she asked sharply. "Saving your feet." Without asking, he tugged off one heel, then the other, ignoring her sputtered protests. He tossed them into the grass and straightened with a grin. "There, now you won't break an ankle." Barefoot, Maya froze, blinking at him. "You can't just... Those were expensive. They'll still be expensive when you pick them up later," he said simply. "But right now they're useless." Heat rushed to her face, from anger, embarrassment, or something else entirely, she wasn't sure. She wanted to argue, but her toes curled against the warm earth, and for the first time all day, she felt grounded. "City girl out of her armor," Rafe teased, eyes glinting. "Don't push your luck," she muttered, though her lips twitched in spite of herself. They walked on, slower now, the grass cool beneath her feet. Rafe pointed out landmarks, an old oak where his grandfather used to rest during cattle drives, a shallow creek where kids still swam in summer, a ridge that gave the best view of the sunset. The more he talked, the quieter Maya became. Each story layered meaning onto the land, making it harder to see it as just acreage to be appraised. When they reached the creek, Rafe knelt to scoop water into his hands, splashing his face before turning toward her. Droplets slid down his jaw, catching sunlight, and Maya looked away quickly, her throat tight. "You don't talk much about yourself," he said after a beat. "I don't need to," she replied. "Maybe you should. People might actually want to know." Her defenses rose like clockwork. "I'm not here to make friends, Rafe. I'm here to do a job." But the words sounded hollow, even to her. Rafe studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he shrugged, rising to his feet. "Suit yourself, but sooner or later you're going to have to figure out whether you want more than a job." The comment hit her like a jolt, rattling against the walls she'd spent years building. She opened her mouth to snap back, but stopped when she saw his face. Not smug, not taunting, just steady. And for the briefest second, she wanted to answer honestly. Instead, she bent to pick up a smooth stone and skipped it across the water. "Let's keep moving," she said quietly. Rafe nodded, falling into step beside her again, but the air between them had shifted, charged with something neither of them could quite name. That night, back in her guest room, Maya stared at her abandoned heels by the door. For the first time, she wondered if walking barefoot hadn't just been about the land. Maybe it was about her too, and the first crack in the armor she'd worn for years. By sunset, the air had cooled, and the ranch buzzed with the energy of gathering. Maya followed the sound of laughter and music around the back pasture, where the Delgados had built a roaring bonfire. Sparks danced up into the night sky, joining the first stars that blinked overhead. Families from neighboring ranches had come, bringing covered dishes, guitars, and endless stories. Children darted between adults, chasing one another in the tall grass. Someone strummed a familiar ranchera tune, and voices lifted in song, carrying rich and unpolished but beautiful harmony. Maya lingered at the edge, clutching a plastic cup of lemonade, unsure if she should insert herself. She wasn't dressed for this, still in her tailored blouse and skirt, and every instinct told her to stand back, observe, remain professional. But then Esperanza spotted her and waved her over with that warm, insistent smile. "Mija, sit, eat. You're too skinny to be working in this heat." Before Maya could refuse, a paper plate piled high with food was placed in her hands, smoky grilled corn, roasted peppers, and tender carne asada that made her mouth water instantly. She found herself sitting among the cousins, who peppered her with questions about city life. "Do you take taxis everywhere? Is it true people don't talk to their neighbors? Do you even know how to ride a horse?" Their laughter was good-natured, but it still flushed her cheeks. She shook her head, admitting softly, "No, I've never even been on a ranch before." That silenced them for half a second, until Rafe's voice came from behind her. "Then we'll have to change that." She turned to find him standing there, a bottle of beer in one hand, firelight flickering against his face. His dark eyes glowed with mischief, and for a moment, she forgot how to breathe. The cousins whooped at his words, egging him on. Someone shouted, "Teacher tomorrow, primo," and laughter rippled again. Maya tried to roll her eyes, but her heart was thudding. "Don't I get a say in this?" "Nope," Rafe said easily, lowering himself onto the log beside her. "You're in our world now." She opened her mouth to argue, but the music shifted, and suddenly people were on their feet, pulling each other into dances around the fire. Someone grabbed Maya's hand before she could protest, dragging her into the circle. "Wait, I don't," she started, but her words were lost in the swell of music. And then Rafe was there, steadying her, his hands warm on her waist. "Relax," he murmured. "Just follow me." Her pulse skittered as he guided her into the rhythm, his steps confident and easy, hers stumbling but slowly catching on. The fire crackled, guitars strummed, voices sang, and for the first time in years Maya laughed. A full, unguarded sound that startled her as much as it seemed to please him. Their eyes met as they moved, and something shifted between them. The world blurred, fading to just the heat of his hands, the sound of his breath, the intensity of his gaze. For one dizzying moment, she thought he might kiss her then and there, surrounded by flames and family. But he didn't. Instead, he spun her lightly, catching her against his chest as the song ended. The cousins cheered, teasing, but Maya barely heard them. She was too busy steadying her heartbeat, too aware of how close Rafe's lips were to hers. When he finally let her go, his hand lingered at her back just a second too long. Later that night, lying in bed, Maya could still feel the echo of his touch and smell the smoke in her hair. The city felt impossibly far away, and for the first time she didn't miss it. The sharp trill of her phone shattered the quiet morning. Maya groaned, fumbling for it on the nightstand. The glowing screen displayed her boss's name. She sat up straighter, smoothing her hair as if he could see her through the line. "Good morning, Mr. Holloway." "Maya," his clipped voice barked. "Where's the initial assessment report? The investors are eager. They want numbers, not excuses." "I'm compiling data now," she said quickly, glancing at the quilt folded over her knees, her heels abandoned by the door. "The land is... Cut the poetry. What's the value?" Her throat tightened, Value. As if acres of history, laughter, and firelit songs could be reduced to digits in a spreadsheet. She hesitated a second too long. Maya. She swallowed hard. It's substantial. I'll send the report tonight. See that you do. He hung up without another word. The silence afterward pressed heavy. Maya stared at her reflection in the small mirror across the room. Tousled hair, bare face, and a softness in her eyes she hardly recognized. She didn't look like the sharp corporate professional she was supposed to be. A knock at the door startled her. "City girl, you awake?" Rafe's voice. She stuffed the phone under the pillow like contraband. "Yeah, 1 second." When she opened the door, Rafe leaned casually against the frame, hat tilted back, a mischievous half-smile tugging his lips. "We're moving cattle today. You're coming." She blinked. "Moving cattle? You said you wanted to understand the land. That means seeing what it takes to keep it alive." "I never said—" He cut her off with a grin. "Don't worry, I'll keep you from getting trampled." Her instinct was to decline, to retreat to her laptop and spreadsheets. But then she remembered the phone call, the cold demand for numbers, and a sharp ache pulsed in her chest. "Fine," she said, surprising even herself. Hours later, dust swirled around her as the herd thundered forward, the ground trembling beneath her borrowed boots. Rafe rode ahead on horseback, shouting commands, his posture steady and commanding. Maya followed on foot with a cousin guiding her, heart pounding as she tried to keep pace. By the time the cattle were penned, sweat streaked her brow and her legs ached, but her chest swelled with something she hadn't felt in years, pride. Rafe dismounted, tying his horse before walking over. "Not bad for a city girl," he teased. Maya laughed breathlessly. "I thought I was going to die at least twice." "You didn't. That's what matters." His eyes softened, and for a moment they just stood there, the noise of the herd fading behind them. She wanted to say something about how this felt more real than anything she'd done in a skyscraper office, but the words caught in her throat. Instead, she admitted quietly, "Your family, your world, it's nothing like mine. That's the point," he said, voice low, steady. "Maybe you've been living in the wrong one." The remark hit deep, breaking another piece of her armor. That night, as she opened her laptop to draft the report, she found herself staring at the blinking cursor. For the first time in her career, she didn't know what to write, because every number felt like a betrayal. The corral smelled of hay, leather, and sun-warmed wood. Horses shifted restlessly, their dark eyes glinting as Maya stood rooted at the fence, arms crossed. "No," she said firmly. "Absolutely not." Rafe leaned against the gate, hat tipped back, his smirk infuriatingly confident. "You said you wanted to understand this place. That means riding." "I said nothing about mounting a 1,000-pound animal with a mind of its own," Maya snapped. Rafe's chuckle was low, unbothered. "You trust me?" She hesitated, caught off guard. His gaze held hers, steady and sure, the kind of gaze that made promises without words. Slowly, against her better judgment, she nodded. "Then trust her, too." He whistled, and a chestnut mare trotted forward. Her coat gleamed, and her black mane flowed like silk. Rafe stroked her muzzle with practiced ease. "This is Esperanza. My mother named her. Means hope." Maya swallowed hard. Hope. The word felt dangerous in her mouth. Rafe guided the horse closer. "She's gentle, smart. She'll take care of you if you let her." "I wear heels to work, Rafe." "Heels, not spurs," Maya muttered. He laughed outright then, the sound warm and disarming. "Good thing I'm not asking you to rope cattle. Just sit, feel, and let go." Before she could argue again, he helped her into the saddle. His hand steadied her waist, lingering a beat longer than necessary. Her heart jolted at the contact. "Hold the reins. Easy," he instructed. The horse shifted beneath her, and Maya's breath caught. She gripped tighter. "You're stiff," Rafe said gently. "She feels your fear. Breathe. Trust." Maya forced air into her lungs, her fingers loosening slightly. To her shock, Esperanza calmed, her steps slow and deliberate as Rafe led her around the corral. Minutes passed, and Maya's panic ebbed. She felt the sway of the mare beneath her, the rhythm grounding, almost soothing. "There you go," Rafe murmured, pride in his tone. "See? She's carrying you just fine." Maya glanced down at him, walking beside the horse with one hand on the lead rope, the other casually in his pocket. His presence was steady, protective, and for the first time, she didn't feel out of place here. When the mare halted, Maya found herself smiling, genuinely, unguarded. "I did it. You did," Rafe said, his grin softer now. "Told you she'd take care of you." As he helped her down, her hand slipped against his chest, the heat of him searing through her palms. They were close, too close, and for a heartbeat, the world fell quiet. Her breath hitched. His thumb brushed her wrist as he steadied her. Neither moved. Then a cousin's shout from across the yard broke the spell, and they stepped apart. But the moment lingered, humming in the space between them. That night, Maya lay awake replaying it, not just the ride, but the feeling of surrender, of trusting something, someone, beyond herself. For the first time in years, she wondered if letting go wasn't the same as losing control. Maybe it was finding it. The air was heavy with the scent of mesquite smoke and summer rain. A storm had rolled through at dusk, leaving the ground damp and the sky streaked with silver clouds. Fireflies blinked over the pasture, tiny lanterns in the dark. Maya sat on the porch steps, her laptop balanced on her knees, though the screen glowed blank. She had opened the file for her report, but no words came. Numbers blurred, rows of data meant nothing, because all she could think about was Rafe. "Working late?" His voice rumbled from behind her. She looked up, startled, as he stepped out of the shadows. The porchlight caught the curve of his jaw, the damp curls peeking from beneath his hat. "Trying to," she admitted, closing the laptop with a sigh. "But your family's ranch doesn't exactly fit into a spreadsheet." He smirked, lowering himself onto the step beside her. "Told you it wouldn't." For a while they sat in silence, listening to the crickets. Maya's pulse raced, every nerve attuned to his nearness. His arm brushed hers once, twice, until the small touches burned like sparks. "You're different here," Rafe said finally, his tone quiet, thoughtful. Her throat tightened. "Different how?" "Less guarded, more real." His eyes locked on hers, steady and searching. "Like maybe the city doesn't have all of you the way you thought it did." Maya swallowed hard. The words cut close to the truth she didn't want to face. "And what if you're wrong?" He leaned in, just enough for her breath to hitch. "I'm not." The space between them throbbed with unspoken things, heat, longing, a need that scared her with its intensity. His gaze flicked to her lips, lingering. Her chest rose, her body swayed toward him before she could stop it. Then, the screen door creaked open. Esperanza's voice floated out. "Rafael, ven, necesitamos tu ayuda." Rafe exhaled sharply, leaning back as if pulling himself from a ledge. "Coming," he called, his voice rough. Maya's skin buzzed where his arm had brushed hers. She stared at her hands, willing them to stop trembling. He stood slowly, tipping his hat. His eyes caught hers one last time, dark and unreadable. "Good night, Maya." And then he was gone, leaving her with the storm still raging inside her chest, a storm more dangerous than any she'd ever weathered. The morning sun spilled gold over the ranch, catching the dew on the fences and turning the fields into a shimmer of green. Maya woke early, restless after the near kiss that had haunted her dreams all night. She needed air, movement, something to clear her head. Slipping into her sneakers, she wandered past the barn. The animals were already stirring, horses whinnying, chickens scratching. The steady rhythm of ranch life calmed her until she heard voices. Not just voices, raised voices. She slowed, pressing against the weathered barn wall. Inside, Rafe and his father, Miguel, were deep in argument. "You can't keep hiding this." Rafe's voice was low but fierce. "She deserves to know." Miguel's reply came sharp, in Spanish too fast for Maya to catch all of it, but the words mantener unido, keep it together, stood out. Her stomach knotted. I'm not a child anymore, Rafe said, louder now. If the ranch is struggling, if we're barely making ends meet, then pretending otherwise doesn't solve anything. Maya froze. Struggling? This ranch, this sprawling land rich with culture and family. Struggling? Miguel's tone softened but remained firm. Your mama believes in hope. So do I. Hope keeps this family strong. Rafe let out a bitter laugh. Hope doesn't pay bills. There was silence, heavy and final. Then footsteps coming her way. Maya darted back, pretending to study the corral fencing. Rafe emerged, jaw tight, his eyes catching hers. For a heartbeat, she thought he'd accuse her of eavesdropping. Instead, he just said, "Couldn't sleep either?" She nodded, her throat dry. Something like that. His gaze lingered, shadowed now with something she hadn't seen before. Not just longing, not just pride, but worry. And suddenly, Maya saw the truth. The ranch wasn't untouchable. The Delgado family wasn't invincible. They carried their legacy like a banner, yes, but also like a weight that might crush them if no one stepped in. Her chest ached. This wasn't just about land anymore. It was about people, about family, about Rafe. But was she willing to put her heart and her career on the line for both? If this story has you holding your breath to see how it all unfolds, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to Porchlight Stories, and turn on notifications so you never miss tales of culture, love, family, and suspense. Your support keeps us bringing these worlds to life. Now, let's dive back in, because the plot is only beginning to thicken, and every family hides secrets, even the ones that seem untouchable. The kitchen was alive with laughter and clatter when Maya walked in later that morning, the scent of cinnamon and fried dough wrapped around her like a blanket. At the big wooden table, the Delgado family was gathered. All of them, it seemed. Cousins, aunts, nieces, nephews. The air hummed with stories traded in English and Spanish, voices overlapping in a beautiful chaos. Maya, Elena waved her over with a flour-dusted hand. Ven, sit. You can't just sneak by without eating. Maya hesitated, overwhelmed. She wasn't used to this kind of energy, this kind of welcome. In her apartment back in the city, breakfast was usually black coffee and a protein bar eaten alone in front of her laptop. Here, Elena set a plate before her piled high with churros, steaming and golden. A small boy, one of Rafe's nephews, she guessed, handed her a little bowl of chocolate sauce with sticky fingers. Dunk it, he instructed, eyes wide with the seriousness of a teacher. She smiled, did as told, and the sweetness melted on her tongue. Oh my God, she breathed, earning a chorus of laughs. Careful, Rafe said from across the table, his mouth curving. That's how they rope you in. My mom's cooking is dangerous. Maya tried to ignore the way his gaze lingered on her, warm and protective. The morning flowed with teasing, with old stories, with children climbing into laps and music playing from someone's phone. Maya felt herself slipping into it, her body relaxing in ways she hadn't known it needed to. She laughed more in 1 hour than she had in months. And when Elena pressed another pastry into her hand and said, "You're too thin, mija. Stay long enough, I'll fix that," Maya's throat tightened, because this was what she'd been missing. The noise, the love, the belonging. Later, as the family dispersed to their chores, she lingered by the sink, rinsing plates. Rafe joined her, hip brushing hers as he reached for a towel. "You fit here," he said softly, almost like he was admitting it to himself. Maya swallowed, her heart stumbling. "Don't," she whispered. "Don't say that." But his eyes told her he already believed it, and the scary part was, so did she. The night was quiet, the kind of quiet only the country could hold. Crickets hummed, the sky stretched black and endless, and the lanterns on the porch flickered with a soft amber glow. Maya stood at the railing, her hands wrapped around a chipped mug of tea Elena had pressed into her palms. The day still clung to her, the laughter, the food, the warmth that made her chest ache with a strange longing. She wasn't supposed to feel this way, not here, not with him. You always think too much when the stars are out. His voice came low, smooth, from behind her. Rafe stepped onto the porch, his boots scuffing against the wood. He moved like he belonged everywhere, but especially here. The strong shoulders, the easy confidence, the way the night seemed to bend around him. Maya's breath caught. And you always sneak up on me. Not sneaking, he said, leaning against the rail beside her. Just checking in. Their shoulders brushed, just enough, too much. Silence stretched, heavy with everything unsaid. She tried to focus on the stars, but the pull of him was stronger. Today meant a lot, she said finally. Your family, they made me feel... She trailed off, unable to finish. Like you belong, he offered softly. Her throat tightened. She nodded, eyes stinging. I haven't felt that in a long time. He turned then, facing her fully, his hand lifting almost without thought to tuck a loose strand of hair behind her ear. The gesture was gentle, tender, but it lit her up like a spark hitting dry grass. Rafe, she whispered, a warning tangled in her breath. But his eyes, dark, searching, asked a question she couldn't ignore, and when his lips finally found hers, there was no stopping it. The kiss was slow at first, tentative, like testing the edge of something dangerous. But the moment her mouth parted under his, the dam broke. His hands framed her face, pulling her closer. Her tea mug slipped, forgotten, as she clutched at his shirt, desperate for more. The taste of him, the heat of him, the sheer want, it shook her to her core. She hadn't realized how starved she'd been until now. When they finally broke apart, breathless, his forehead rested against hers. This changes things, he murmured. Maya's pulse pounded, her chest rising and falling against his. I know. And the truth was, she didn't want to change it back. The morning after their kiss, Maya woke restless, her thoughts knotted and messy. The memory of Rafe's mouth on hers lingered like wildfire smoke, impossible to ignore, clinging to everything. But reality was waiting, sharp-edged and merciless. Her phone buzzed with back-to-back emails the second she turned it on. Proposals, deadlines, a stern reminder from her boss. We expect an update on the Delgado property acquisition by end of week. The words hit like a punch. She was here to close a deal, not to fall into a man's arms under starlight. By the time she reached the barn, Rafe was already working, shirt damp with sweat, his movements precise and steady. He glanced up, gave her a smile that twisted her insides, but the warmth faltered when he saw the phone clutched tight in her hand. City calling? He asked, his tone more guarded than yesterday. She forced a shrug. Just work. He nodded, but his jaw tightened. Work that could take this land from us. The words stung, harsher than she expected. Rafe, I'm not the enemy. Aren't you? His eyes flashed. Your company wants to bulldoze everything my family has built. You want to pave over memories, traditions, our way of life. Her breath caught. I don't, she broke off, frustrated. It's not that simple. Feels simple from here. His voice was quiet, but the disappointment cut deeper than anger would have. They stood facing each other, the silence heavy with all the things last night had promised and this morning threatened to take away. Finally, Maya whispered, Last night wasn't simple either. That made him pause. His hand flexed at his side, like he wanted to reach for her but didn't trust himself. No, he admitted softly. It wasn't. The sound of children laughing drifted from the farmhouse, breaking the moment. Rafe looked away, shoulders tense, and returned to his work. Maya turned too, her chest aching. Because this was the fault line between them. A kiss couldn't erase it, and unless one of them stepped across, everything would crack wide open. It started with smoke. Maya was in the kitchen with Elena, helping chop onions for dinner, when shouts rang out from the yard. She dropped the knife and ran to the porch, heart pounding. Across the pasture, a thin column of gray rose into the sky. Rafe was already sprinting, a bucket in each hand, his brothers on his heels. The acrid scent of burning wood carried on the wind. Maya's blood turned cold. By the time she reached the fence line, the source was clear. One of the storage sheds, flames licking at the walls, heat crackling. Cattle bawled nervously, kicking up dust. "Stay back," Rafe barked when he saw her, his face streaked with sweat and soot. He and the others formed a frantic chain, hauling water, beating back the fire with wet burlap. But it wasn't just an accident. Maya's gaze caught the jagged cut in the fence nearby, the tracks in the dirt. Someone had done this. Sabotage. Her stomach clenched. She didn't need a corporate report to recognize a dirty move. She'd seen enough underhanded deals in the city to know when someone was trying to break a family's back. And now it was happening here. Maya grabbed another bucket, ignoring Rafe's shouted protest, and fell into line with the others. Smoke stung her eyes, her arms ached, but she didn't stop until the last flame hissed and died, leaving only charred wood and scorched earth. Silence fell, broken only by labored breathing. Rafe turned to her, his chest heaving, eyes burning not from smoke but from something raw. "You could have gotten hurt." "So could you," she shot back, coughing, wiping ash from her cheek. What was I supposed to do, stand there and watch? The anger in his face cracked, revealing something softer. "You didn't have to, but you did." Their eyes held, smoke swirling between them, the weight of what had almost been lost pressing close. Behind them, Miguel spat into the dirt, his jaw set. "This wasn't an accident. Someone wants us gone." The family murmured agreement, fear and fury in equal measure. Maya's heart pounded as the truth slammed into her. She wasn't just an outsider anymore. She was in the middle of this, the fight for the ranch, the fight for family. And walking away was no longer an option. The ranch was quiet after the fire, too quiet. The charred remains of the shed stood as a dark reminder that someone wanted the Delgados broken. But Maya couldn't stop thinking about what Elena had said as they cleaned ash from the kitchen floor. Family isn't just who you're born to, it's who you fight beside. That truth rooted itself deep in her chest. Later that evening, Maya found Rafe near the paddock, leaning against the fence, the glow of sunset painting him in gold. He looked exhausted, shadows under his eyes, but still unshakably solid. "You were right," she said softly, stepping closer. He didn't look at her. "About what?" "About me being the enemy." Her voice wavered, but she pushed through. "When I came here, all I saw was numbers. Land value, profit margins, projections. I didn't see the people. I didn't see you." That made him turn, finally, his eyes dark and searching. "But now I do," Maya whispered. "And I won't be the reason this family loses what makes it whole." The silence between them stretched, heavy and full of things neither dared say. Then Rafe reached for her hand, rough and warm, grounding her. "You don't know what you're giving up," he murmured. "I do." She swallowed hard. The city, the job, the so-called future I thought I wanted. It was all autopilot, Rafe. This, she gestured to the ranch, to him. This woke me up. His thumb brushed over her knuckles, slow and tender. And what happens when my family's mess gets too heavy? When it's not churros and laughter, but long nights and hard choices? She met his gaze, steady now. Then we carry it, together. The wall he'd held so tightly finally cracked. With a sound like surrender, he pulled her into his arms, kissing her with a fire that erased doubt, erased distance. It was urgent, deep, but threaded with something more powerful than desire, faith. When they broke apart, foreheads pressed together, his voice came rough and certain. "You're mine, Maya, not the cities, not the companies, mine." "And you," she whispered, tears catching in her lashes, "are home." Behind them, as if on cue, the ranch began to buzz with the sounds of evening. Children laughing, cattle lowing, Elena calling out for dinner. Life, pulsing, imperfect but beautiful. And for the first time in years, Maya didn't feel like an observer. She felt like she belonged. Not because she'd chosen land, not because she'd chosen love, but because she'd chosen family. because she'd chosen home. The city skyline rose like steel and glass mountains, but to Maya, it no longer felt majestic, only hollow. She sat across from her boss in his corner office, the same place she'd once dreamed of reaching herself. Behind him, the sun glinted off skyscraper windows, but all she could think of was the golden light spilling across the Santiago ranch at dusk. Her boss leaned forward, fingers steepled. "So, did you close it? Tell me you got the Santiago land." Maya folded her hands in her lap, steadying her breath. For years, she'd come into this building on autopilot, chasing deadlines, approval, and bonuses that never filled the quiet inside her. Now, for the first time, she felt alive because she knew where she belonged. "No," she said simply, her voice clear. "And you won't. That land isn't for sale. It's not just dirt and fences, it's a legacy, and I won't be the one to strip it away." His brows drew together, disbelief flashing across his face. "You're passing on the deal of a lifetime. Maya, do you have any idea what this does to your career, to your future?" She stood, sliding an envelope across his sleek desk. Her resignation letter, her heartbeat steady, stronger than it ever had in this office. "My future isn't here," she said softly. "It's not in contracts or concrete. It's out there with people who know the value of love, family, and roots that run deeper than profit." The silence that followed was sharp, cutting. Finally, her boss leaned back, shaking his head. "You're making a mistake." Maya's lips curved into a smile that was both gentle and unshakable. "No, I'm finally making the right choice." She turned, heels tapping against polished tile, each step lighter than the last. By the time she reached the elevator, she wasn't walking away from something, she was walking toward it, toward Rafe, toward his family, toward a life that had already claimed her heart. And as the elevator doors slid shut, Maya felt it deep in her bones. She was finally free. The ranch hummed with life under a warm spring sun. Wildflowers swayed in the breeze, horses grazed in the pastures, and laughter drifted from the big farmhouse where children chased each other across the porch. Maya stood at the edge of the garden, her hands brushing the tops of tomato plants she'd helped Elena plant last season. Her city clothes had long been traded for jeans and boots, her hair tied back loosely as she soaked in the simple piece of it all. Behind her, footsteps crunched on gravel. "You're supposed to be resting," Rafe said, slipping an arm around her waist. His lips grazed her temple, and she leaned into him instinctively. "I am resting," she teased, glancing down at the gentle swell of her belly. "I'm just not good at sitting still." He chuckled, his hands settling protectively over hers on her stomach. "Our kid's gonna be stubborn as hell. Runs in the family," she said with a smirk, tilting her head to meet his kiss. Across the yard, Miguel called instructions to his sons as they repaired a fence, while Elena waved from the porch, a basket of fresh tortillas in her arms. The air was full of music, of language, of love. Maya's chest tightened, but not with longing anymore, with fullness, with peace. She thought of the woman she'd been a year ago, living in spreadsheets and deadlines, measuring her worth in late-night emails. That woman had been tired, hollow, drifting. This woman, the one standing here now with dirt under her fingernails, a baby on the way, and a man who looked at her like she was his whole world. This woman was alive. Rafe kissed her again, slow and sure, and murmured, "Welcome home, Maya." She smiled, tears pricking her eyes as she looked out at the land, the family, the life they'd built. Home, it wasn't just a place, it was a choice, and she'd chosen right. Thank you for listening to Roots of the Heart. This story reminds us that sometimes life puts us on autopilot, chasing success, deadlines, or expectations, until someone or something wakes us up. Maya learned that family, culture, and love are the true riches of life, and that stepping away from what the world tells you to want can lead you to what you truly need. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to Porchlight Stories, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next journey of love, family, and redemption. Your support keeps these stories alive. Until then, thank you for listening, and I'll meet you at the Porchlight for the next story.